and so I don't want to delay things by too much. And now we'll just tell you where next year's SIGCOMM is going to be. Some just very quick update on the SIG EC. Actually, we have several members of the SIG EC. Dina is here, Lars is here, and Aditya was over there, right? And I think Steve was around. Steve is our conference coordinator, but I don't see him in the room right now. So anyway, and then we'll go very quickly over what's going on in the SIG, and then hopefully we'll have some discussions and open Q&A sessions. So next year is in Beijing. The general chairs are Wendy Hall and Jianping Wu. And the program chairs are Katerina Argiraki and John Heidemann. And it will be held in Beijing from August 19 to August 24. So roughly more or less the same time frame as this year. There'll be a more official announcement and some additional material that's going to be presented tomorrow at the end of the banquet. But this is just sort of to let everybody know that this is where next year's SIGCOMM is going to be, just in case you're not going to the banquet. The SIG, so Lars, Aditya, and myself, and then Keshav is the past chair, Olivier is our CCR editor, Anduo is essentially running the website, and communications letter, and Dina is our award chair, so you saw her present the award this morning. Steve is our conference coordinator. For anyone who is interested in running a conference for the SIG, we'll hopefully be talking to Steve and can reach out to him. Marinho is our new director. So if you remember last year, for those of you who were here, we had a new position on the EC for someone who was going to be specifically focused on diversity and outreach. So Marinho was a co-general chair for SIGCOMM in Brazil, and he's holding this particular position, and Tristan is our education coordinator. So as I said, Steve, Dina, Lars, Aditya, and myself are at the conference, and if you have any questions or want to discuss anything, feel free to talk to any one of us. So this slide, so actually the relative percentage are, I think, correct. The absolute number may or may not be correct. I just got an email from ACM about 10 minutes before this meeting that they had just changed how they were reporting membership numbers, and they are now omitting expired memberships, which seemed to be something that I would have done in the first place. So I don't know exactly whether the total number of about 2,500 is correct. It may still be correct because I think the other numbers that I had were not including people who are SIG-only members, and it's actually a relatively large percentage of people who are SIG-only members, so they are not ACM member, they are only subscribing to the SIG as opposed to ACM and then the SIG. I think that the net is that there's not a lot of change. I think the SIG remains a somewhat predominantly North American organization. We've made progress in terms of diversification in Europe and in Asia, but for other parts of the world, we are still woefully underrepresented, in particular in South America and Africa and the Middle East, where we really don't have much presence. On the gender diversity front, we're also not doing very well. As I said, the difference that you're seeing between the 2 years is probably noise, right? And so I'll talk a little bit later about some initiative that we are putting in place to try to actually move things in the right direction, but there's obviously much progress that remains to be made. So very quickly, right, in terms of where the money comes from, so it comes from 3 major sources. It comes from conference surplus, DL or ACM digital library revenues, and memberships. Memberships are a teeny fraction. The 2 biggest sources of revenue are digital library, which is about 150K, and conference surpluses, which do vary from year to year. And also a little bit hard to track because of how ACM reports budgets, right? So it's not as if they, the numbers are wrong, but in the same way as you have expired memberships, sometimes it's hard to figure out whether it's the actual or the predicted and so on. So approximately, our surplus for the past 12 months across all our different conferences is around 200K, which is similar to what we had in 2016. The biggest contributor to that surplus on the conference front is the SIGCOMM conference, with IMC and CONEXT coming sort of distant second and varying from year to year. Most of the time, both conferences make surpluses, but they're significantly lower than those of the SIGCOMM conference. So these are actually the breakdown, right, sort of as for the conferences over the past 12 months. Last year was actually good. We didn't have any conference in the red, which was actually not the case in 2016. But sort of this adds up to roughly sort of the 200K that I was sort of referring to earlier. Now, how do we use our money? So we have the money that we generate every year, and we have money that we have in the bank. Right, and so we've actually been spending more than the money that we generate every year. We've been sort of spending down some of the reserve that we've accumulated over the year, and that's a decision that was made a couple of years ago and that the different ECs since then have sort of tried to stick with. We were actually originally thinking that we would be spending down faster than we are, and the reason we're not is not because we're not giving out sort of quite a bit of money, and I'll come back to that in a second, is that I think our surpluses have remained very healthy over the year. Actually, if you look at the budget, the predicted budget versus actual budgets, we typically do better when you look at the actual numbers compared to the predicted numbers, and sort of and when we do our budget initially, we look at the predicted number as opposed to we don't have the actual numbers yet. So we'll probably have a deficit of 100K, which is sounds a lot, but actually we still have a pretty large buffer, and so even though ACM requires that we maintain a sort of reserve of about $600,000, right, to be sort of financially sort of sound and be able to cover losses of our conferences if that ever happened. We still have about another 650K at our disposal that we're going to be spending over the next few years on various initiatives. So what are some of those initiatives? So, we support regional conferences such as ComsNet, AI in Tech, AppNet. So actually, let me see. We support awards, such, the different awards that you saw this morning. And we support about 280K over the past 12 months in various kind of grants. The biggest chunks being travel grants for students, but we also have diversity grants. We have grants for regional summits, for regional conferences, for summer schools in different regions. So this all comes up to about 280K. We also have childcare grants, and this is something that we're actually looking at trying to expand. So SIGCOMM a few years back started a program where there was a childcare support at the conference. That didn't work out very well, primarily because the childcare needs of the attendees were relatively diverse, and so it was really hard to come up with a solution that worked well for everyone. And so the alternative was to actually provide childcare grants that people could apply. And one of the options we're considering is to actually expand that to not only be childcare, to support childcare support at the conference, but often it's actually childcare is something that may be preventing someone from coming to the conference because they don't want to travel with their children, but they can also not travel if there's nobody to take care of their children. And so the goal is to open the grants to actually also include childcare support for at-home sort of type of situation. Okay. Before I go to this, let me now come back to a couple of updates regarding conferences. So couple of conferences that we were either co-sponsoring or sponsoring. So e-Energy, which was a conference, as its name indicates, dedicated to energy. There's a new EGG that has been created, EGG standing for Emerging Interest Group, which is a new structure that ACM has put in place to serve as an intermediate step between the creation of a new SIG and sort of the process. It was a lighter process than what is required in order to establish a new SIG. And so the new EIG was established in the area of e-energy, and the plan is for them to essentially take ownership of that conference, e-energy, which we had been sponsoring, and that will therefore likely happen in 2019. SOSR was a conference that sort of was, and maybe Aditya, you can say a few more words if people are interested, but it was sort of co-organized with the Linux Foundation, right? And the plan right now is to actually move towards a fully sponsored conference by the SIG, which could potentially be still co-located with ONS, the Open Networking Summit, which is run by the Linux Foundation, but would now be a separate conference. For those of you who remember, after last year's SIGCOMM, we did a survey regarding a variety of issues and question we had about the conference and possible evolutions or initiative that we were going to take into the conference. The results, there were 173 people who participated. The results, there was a SIGCOMM communications newsletter that was sent out with a link, which I've sort of reproduced here, that has all the results of that survey. And sort of some of the questions related to potential sort of changes to the SIGCOMM conference, whether it came to having revisions or having multiple deadlines. So the survey provided some input. There were some healthy discussions on that particular topic, and sort of when any follow-on is sort of in the court of the technical steering committee that basically has the mandate of is overseeing sort of the evolution, the technical evolution of the conference. A question that came up and that I wanted to, and unfortunately we don't have necessarily a representative sample of people here, but a question that came up was regarding the dates of the conference. So our website specifies, well hidden, but it's there. It specified that the SIGCOMM conference should take place between August 10 and September 10, so which is a 1 month window, right? And I think it's going back. I think it's been in general roughly the dates that the SIGCOMM conference over the past, I don't know, 15, 20 years has sort of been taking place. But over the past 4 to 5 years, it's actually been pretty much regularly during the third week of August, and it works well for certain people, and it doesn't work well for other people. And so, some of the people for whom it doesn't work well have sort of raised the issue of, why, or could we have the conference held, either earlier, right, or later after the start of, September. And so I know that there is no unique, perfect solution that everybody will agree upon, right? I think in general, the current dates work well for many people in academia in the US, although not all of them. It doesn't work that well for people who are in Europe. And it also, that was actually how the question came about. People who have young children have found it sort of difficult to find babysitting opportunity, sort of possibilities if they were to come to the conference and have someone taking care of their child. They felt that this was the worst week, right? It sort of coincides with the start of the school year in a number of U.S. states, and so I just wanted to put it out and hear, if there's any particular thoughts and opinions. I know that again, there's not a unique, perfect solution. Yeah, I mean, I think it's perfectly legitimate and reasonable. I think there was sort of the. So I think next year the original plan was to try to have it in early September, in part because the weather in Beijing is really, really hot in August, and while September is not necessarily much, much better, it was still going to be a little bit better than that. Apparently that suggestion was discussed at a recent conference where a number of senior people sort of made the point that it could result in a much lower attendance from North America because the majority of people from North America tend to prefer those dates. And so this is my understanding of what led to the reshuffling of the dates back to that particular week, which is in part why I wanted to raise the issue. Because I think, I totally agree. I think it's wrong to have the same people necessarily. I mean, for me, it's actually, I like this date, right? It's not bad for me. So but I agree that it's not really the best to have, the same people being hit all the time. Okay, can we have the mic? A doodle.
Yeah.
So, I mean, right, we could have a survey.
Yeah. Right, but being the member for some age, let's say the survey can be much shorter than the comprehensive survey by Doodle, right? So you have several fields to fill, which is much faster to get the results.
Yeah. We could certainly. That one follow-on would be to try to get a sense for what is the relative split in terms of preferences across the community. At the same time, I feel that the principle of some level of rotation is one that is not necessarily should not be necessarily driven by just numbers of how many people are in one category or another.
So I may use the example of Mobicom, which does one thing badly, and I will turn that into a virtue, which is it tends to kind of, it used to be in September, but these days it moves around between mid-August to end October. Partly because the different venues have different preferred dates based on, say, weather, based on large conference hall availabilities, and so on. Mm-hmm. And I think that sometimes solves this problem that when one group of people don't get hit every year. And perhaps that's a possibility to consider, but also the stability of SIGCOMM, I think, is also very much appreciated, so it's a trade-off.
Yeah.
Hi, I'm Shir, postdoc at Princeton University. I was actually one of the people, I don't know if there were others who raised this issue. I have 3 kids, and that's why this specific week is a week where it's no childcare at all, no daycare, no day camps, nothing. I left my partner to fend with the 3 kids, which may build character for him and the kids, but nonetheless is not always trivial. So this is why this specific time is a bit more problematic for parents in general.
Yeah, I would not want to do a sort of formal voting thing, but I would highly suggest that we don't crack down on organizers that pick another week than week 3 in August, and make them move the conference so that it is there, right? So some dates work better for some organizers and some venues, and if we get some variability that way, I think that's fine, right? So it should move a bit. My birthday is August 16th, right? I have spent it many times at SIGCOMM. It would be nice to not do that. It was, but I also like my wife.
Hi, Colin Perkins, University of Glasgow. There was a comment earlier about increasing geographic diversity of the participants. If we survey the current participants, you are likely to end up ossifying on the current
Right.
geographical distribution, because you'll pick a time that suits the majority of the current participants.
Right.
And yes, this may be an inconvenient week for childcare for North Americans. It's a great week for people in the UK. Schools haven't gone back yet.
All right, so I mean, again, I'm not sure. I mean, I was not planning on reaching a consensus. I think I wanted to at least make sure that the topic was brought up, that there was an awareness that, dates, and, this is a date that not necessarily works well for everybody, and therefore that, it's probably useful for us to think about what it is that we can do to sort of even out the pain in terms of when the conference takes place, while at the same time acknowledging, and I agree with what Lars was saying, is that we don't want to force organizer into picking a particular choice that would be bad for them. I think what we want to try to encourage is sort of greater diversity in the choice of dates, so that a particular date that is bad for certain people doesn't repeatedly occur.
And if you really care deeply, right, and you want a full control over when it is, we're looking for venues for 2020 in North America, and here's your chance to, fix that dates that work for you. If you send us a good proposal,
Yeah.
hey,
would Atlanta
it may work.
Well, sounds good to me. Okay, all right.
I know there's no formal slot for the technical steering committee, but I thought, given that you just mentioned the survey and having moved the next steps into the technical steering committee, that it would be worth saying that the technical steering committee has discussed the idea of multiple deadlines, and the decision is to wait and see what the NSDI experience turns out to be. And so, and there's some intent to gather data that might allow some form of additional insight into what it would mean if SIGCOMM were to move to multiple deadlines. So just so people know that that aspect of the survey did get discussed, has gotten discussed in the technical steering committee, and that is the current plan.
Okay, thanks for that. All right, a couple of other things to make you aware of. So reproducibility, I mean, you've probably heard sort of that particular topic mentioned on a number of occasions. It's sort of risen to prominence, and I think rightfully so. There's been a number of workshops that have been organized. It deals with essentially the question of, can we sort of, if somebody has some results, can we repeat or reproduce those results, and under what conditions, as well as, are the systems that have been used to generate those results available to others. And so Olivier, which is the CCR editor, has sort of put in place an initiative that is in this general area, which is going to be aimed at evaluating artifacts, right? So that are part of what we're presenting at conferences, and that are often used to generate some of the data on which results in some of our papers rest. So these are charts that Olivier sent me that basically, so this particular charts just sort of shows the number of artifacts that were included in publications across our different conferences. And so you can see that there's actually, it's not every paper has an artifact, but a solid number of papers do include artifacts. And at the same time, ACM has put in place a so-called badging system that basically allow you to evaluate and report the evaluation of those artifacts that that have generated data or that are part of what a paper is all about. And there's different levels, and so if you go to the ACM site, it will actually tell you exactly what each level corresponds to. It's sort of a progression in terms of how vetted those artifacts have been and how easy they are for others to use. Now, what sort of SIGCOMM, and so what Olivier is going to be doing is putting together a committee that's going to be responsible for evaluating artifacts that are from papers that are submitted to our conferences. So he's actually looking for volunteers. Now, this is going to be, it's an opt-in type of model where if you have an artifact and you have a paper that has been accepted and presented at a SIGCOMM conference, you can actually opt in to have your artifact evaluated by this committee. This will then basically give rise to, after the committee's work, to the assignment potentially of one of the ACM badges as a function of the findings of what the committee is about and the availability of the artifact. The goal is to sort of publish a summary of all these evaluation in CCR, and sort of Olivier is currently he has identified a couple of people who are going to be willing to help him spearhead that particular committee, but obviously they're looking for additional people. Evaluating an artifact is actually quite a bit more work than reviewing the paper that might be accompanying or that might be on which the artifact might be based. And so if you're interested in helping out, or if you know people who might be interested in helping out, you can apply. There's a URL that Olivier has made available. And the deadline is October, which will sort of coincide, I think, such that papers accepted at CONEX will be known by that time, so that if it's a CONEX paper, obviously SIGCOMM papers will be already known, but CONEX paper will also be included. So a couple of projects, as I mentioned earlier, increasing diversity. So one of the things that the SIG is doing, and that will be announced more formally at the N2 Women Dinner on Thursday, is to actually expand our collaboration with the N2 Women organization in a number of different ways. The most significant one is that we're going to essentially support a workshop, an N2 Women workshop every single year. And that will be held at one of the SIG's conference. It will rotate across our conferences so that it's not always at the same one, but there will be an N2 Women workshop each year at one of the SIG's conferences. There will always be an N2 Women dinner, like the one that's taking place on Thursday this year. That will be held at the SIGCOMM conference, and there will also be 2 N2 Women Service Awards that are going to be presented yearly at the SIGCOMM conference to recognize women who have actually played a role in sort of promoting diversity and helping sort of our community become more diverse. Ellen talked about the CARES committee, and so this is something that we had started to put in motion. It was going more slowly than what we wanted to, in part because originally we wanted to sort of do a thorough job, and sort of had realized that people who are going to be on that committee need some kind of training. It's sort of there are so many different situations that you might be faced with that if you have absolutely no training, it could be a somewhat challenging role. And so we had discussed, and SIG Arch and SIG Micro, who have actually already put in place such a committee, and had similar discussion with ACM. ACM had said, yep, we're going to put training sessions in place so that you can take advantage of that. And we were waiting for those training sessions, and we're still waiting for the training session. So when Ellen sort of approached us to say, why don't we do something for this particular SIGCOMM conference, we just went ahead and decided to essentially take that opportunity and hopefully learn from it. And if people have suggestions on how and we should be structuring such a committee and how to make it more effective, make it easier for people to not be intimidated if they ever encounter such a situation. Again, you can contact any one of the members of the committee, as Ellen was sort of mentioning this morning. The last item that I want to mention is, IMC approached us to try to run a shadow PC meeting, which is something that many conferences have been doing. And we decided to try to take that opportunity for them to figure out, what are the differences between in-person and remote PC meetings, right? Remote PC meetings through WebEx or Zoom or some of these other tools, right, are obviously logistically much easier to organize. It makes it therefore easier for people, from different backgrounds to sort of to participate. They are less expensive for those people, right, who don't have to figure out how to travel and so on. But obviously, they don't give rise to the same kind of interactions that you have in an in-person PC meeting, right? And although a shadow PC meeting obviously doesn't involve exactly the same mix of people who are participating in regular PC meetings, we felt that it was going to be money well spent to try to give them both the opportunity of do the things that they wanted to do in the first place, and for us to try to gain some insight into how those differences may play out in the context of the decision. So they'll be providing a report that will be published in CCR about their experience, what worked, what didn't work, and so on. But I think the high order bit in terms of the feedback that they gave us after sort of the event was taking place, it's not completely done because they're going to be meeting at IMC to actually have some of the members of the two different groups sort of discuss how things went for each side. But I think the high order bit was that they felt there was no huge difference in terms of the outcomes. However, there was a significant disadvantage to remote PC meeting for sort of more junior people for whom actually a PC meeting is a very important networking opportunity, which obviously they don't have to the same extent when it's a remote PC meeting.
Just one thought. I think it's interesting to look at this as an A/B test. It's definitely an interesting thing to try. I guess I'm nervous about reaching strong conclusions from this individual A/B test, if only because I think there were two things that were on my mind. One is that we have recent anecdotal, but nevertheless evidence from conferences that changed from face-to-face PC meetings to remote ones. Oakland is in this category, where people who were on the PC in the back-to-back years of the switch have reported anecdotally that they felt that the quality of intellectual discussion in the remote PC meeting and level of engagement of PC members was radically inferior with a remote PC meeting. And so there is anecdotal evidence from other PCs that's negative. I think the other thing I would just say is that I think there are certain things that happen at face-to-face PC meetings that may affect a very, very small number of papers and wouldn't be seen as a very major high-level effect, but where, for example, there's a strong disagreement about a particular piece of prior work and three people who are experts go into another room and talk for face-to-face very animatedly for 30 minutes. Mm-hmm. And for our flagship conference for SIGCOMM, I would hate to see those sorts of opportunities go away.
Right. So I think you're reading a little bit too much, and maybe you have some sensitivity to the topic. Right. There was absolutely no intention of using this as sort of a strong piece, as I think I tried to position at the beginning. Right. The composition even of the two of a shadow PC is very different from the composition. So there's no intent of, this is just one bit of information that's going to be added to a very complex, right, and problem that we are all looking at. And obviously no one is going to be making any decision on the basis of whatever the outcome of that is, right? So I think that is clear and obvious, right? In the same way that we don't want to make decisions on the basis of, as you pointed out, anecdotal evidence. It's just one piece of information, and
yeah, I get it. And I think my high bit wasn't that I think some momentous decision is going to be made on the basis of that A/B test. I think my point was that, in the sense that this is an anecdote, there are other anecdotes as well with different conclusions.
Sure. I mean, and we should be gathering all the information that we have. I think that's really, it's an information gathering process and the more information we have, hopefully the better the decision we can in the end make.
So I wanted to just point out that there's another message in here, which is the criticality of what we do in odd ways of putting young junior researchers together with senior researchers. And I would have argued actually at TPC meetings, actually one of the most crucial things is the dinner, which you could actually hold at the main conference if you were worried about a lack of time to connect. But we're also seeing it in some of the diversity activities we do, the popularity of the mentoring programs, and I was noticing just walking around this year and at the reception and trying to talk to people, I didn't know how many of them really were receptive to that and wanted to talk in an animated way, and thinking about more ways to cause those engagements to happen beyond TPC meetings would be a good thing, and that's all I'm just raising the subject for now. We can muse about it later.
Yeah, I mean, I think I agree. These are valid, absolutely valid points. All right, anyone else? Nope. Okay. So actually, it's sort of a segue into, I think, the point that Craig just made. But I think, we need to do better in terms of engaging our junior people, in terms of reaching out to them, as well as making them aware of opportunities that are available to them. I don't think, we do advertise them, but I don't think we do a good enough job in actually being more proactive and reaching out. So I think that's great that you reach out to people you didn't know, right? I try to do that, but I think it does take an effort that's not easy to take. Because we have actually a number of activities that are there to help, promote sort of interactions for some of our junior members of our community, whether they are students or junior faculty. So for example, the SIG is sponsoring the CRA grad cohort, which is a workshop that CRA holds, right, that brings together junior and senior researcher from academia and industry. And so, the students and junior faculty can apply, and if you're selected, then essentially CRA pays for your travel and so on. And it's a great opportunity for interaction, and we do send a member of the SIG. So Dina was one of the two, and Chen Ni Chua was the other person who attended the CRA cohort workshop. And I think one of the reflection from their participating in that event is, while it was good, right, the number of networking and system students, right, could have been higher, right? It was sort of in some sense, potentially missed opportunity, given that we sponsor the CRA, right? And we would love to see more of our students. So we're going to try to do a number of things, right, through and to women, and then sending out on various mailing lists to make student and junior faculty aware of that opportunity. But I think this is again an area where we can do better. And so if you know students or junior faculty, right, I mean, I think making them aware that the SIG is obviously trying to create sort of some of those opportunities. Improving that is something that I think we can do better.
Advisors aware of those programs so that they can communicate it to the students.
Okay, fair enough. Oops. Okay. So again, if you have any thoughts and suggestions, feel free to reach out and let any of us know. Please.
Mia Kulun, I don't have any thoughts for you, but the ACM itself had the same problem, and they established a new initiative which is called Future of Computing Academy. So I'm a member of that. I'm actually a member of the executive committee of that initiative, which is also targeting early career people, junior faculty or late PhD students, whatever, to get more involved into the ACM and shaping the community, shaping the future of computing. Yeah, actually, I wanted to talk to you about this anyway, but maybe I can announce this initiative later at the conference, because there are not too many people in the room anymore.
Right. Okay, yeah, definitely, please. And future, I mean, it's certainly one initiative that we can try to leverage. and at the very least make sure that we can connect the dots that we're not connecting.
It's a very new initiative, and it seems like many of the SIGs don't know about this yet. So we have a lot of members from SIG Chi and very few members from other SIGs. But it's growing, so we have a new recruiting round next year, so more interactions between the SIGs, and this initiative would be welcome from both sides, I guess.
Thank you.
Hi, Colin Perkins. So I think there are a reasonable number of small, very informal, probably without published proceedings, workshops happening around the world, just for sort of local communities in particular countries or particular regions. I don't know if there's a way of getting SIGCOMM involved in those, even if it's just a small amount of sponsorship and some logos and some materials, but that may be a way of raising visibility. So maybe worth considering.
We do have, as part of the money that the SIG budgets, right? We have a number of categories where we actually invite applications. So some of the workshops that are the smaller workshop, right? CommsNet, AINTech, AppNet started exactly like that. They were sort of relatively local conferences and workshops that sort of reached out and asked, and the SIG, and we've been sponsoring them for a number of years. There was a Latin American workshop that sort of ended up not necessarily working out, and so we were trying to restart that one with sort of some local organization. But I guess the main challenge is making those small grassroots sort of initiatives aware that the SIG is receptive to supporting them in a variety of different ways, and therefore creating sort of an engagement process that can hopefully bring right. So I think closing that loop is, I think, for us has been the main challenge.
Yeah, I would agree. I think the awareness that the SIG is willing to sponsor that sort of event is not there.
Yeah.
Yeah, I want to build on Colin's point for a moment, which is there's even more sub-regional stuff. So, for example, we have a regional conference for women in information technology in Colorado that's sponsored by the local universities that we do, in part because the Grace Murray Hopper conference has gotten so outrageously expensive to send people to. You now have to rent a house at the venue like 12 months in advance to be able to send, we try to send 20 to 30 students, and the only way to do it now is start looking at renting a house near the venue kind of thing. It's gotten that outrageously expensive. It was $800, a month ago it was $800 a night for hotels in Houston that were anywhere near the conference venue, like within 10 miles. So it's getting crazy. But anyway, so there are lots of these other local things, and I will say the students are quite engaged. Just, that's the other point is, finding the way to reach them. We have an ACM chapter, we have an ACMW chapter, we have all these things, and a security chapter. They're all run by women in my department, which is sort of interesting, but the students who have taken over the running of it. We've got all these active things going, and maybe we should think a little bit about how to tap into some of those.
Yeah, as I said, I think absolutely right. The big challenge is how to sort of push the information so that it reaches them, and I think Anya's point that we maybe should try to reach out to the advisors is sort of a valid one, right? They might be the right entry point, though some advisors are sometimes not necessarily as on top of things as others, so it might not. It will vary, right? So, and. Oh, so, right. So the measure, I think, is twofold. One, let's see. Oh, come on. Right. Is that I think, if you look at student membership in the SIG, it's flat, right? It's not going anywhere, right? Conversion of student membership into SIG members is not very high. And then I think but that's not unique to the SIG. That actually it's an ACM-wide problem where our student organization and WashU is the same as I guess Colorado State, right? Where we have really energetic student organization. Our WICS, Women in Computer Science group, is really gung-ho, and they organize all kind of stuff. Our ACM group is very active as well. But once they graduate, they sort of disengage relatively quickly. And solving that particular dilemma is, I don't have a good sort of recipe for that. It's sort of a reality that we're facing, and I don't know I don't know of anyone who has really a very potent sort of solution to that problem.
Hi, Paulo Mendes. When I look at the question, what are students looking for? I just remember what happened today, and I see this every time in SIGCOMM and other conference. Students go there to where you are and say that they're looking for a job. PhD students. So we have very good PhD students here, and we, as senior members, are always looking for good members for research centers and companies. Maybe people are talking on coffee breaks for this. Maybe if we do this more officially, we'll bring more students to the conference.
So I think, we've tried, and that's, I think, so the SIG as an industry liaison board, right, that has actually tried to play a role in, because that's what they actually, they are on the other side of the equation, right? They are interested in recruiting students. And I think that aspect is growing, so I think it has been growing. So I think, while we're not a job fair, and I don't think that we want to, right? I think there's been more has been done. I think students have become aware to the point that even some company are now organizing events on the side of the conference which conflict with some of the other conference events that are not necessarily always positive. But so I think there's been progress in that direction, but I think there's also students who are not necessarily looking for a job. I was talking to some students who are a first-year PhD student, right? And what they're interested in is, what should I do, right? When I'm at a conference, how do I go about, how do I approach people? How do I find out who I should be talking to? They don't recognize faces. So I think this is probably one area also where we should be, I think, trying to do better. And I guess the kind of proactive, talking to people you don't know that Craig was mentioning earlier is definitely one way for us, for senior people, to help things move things in the right direction.
One of the things that you could think about is making those people that actually get student travel grants required to be part of a social student-to-student interactions, kind of organize the most senior students to actually introduce some of the junior students to how certain things being done. Just kind of informal, kind of a lunch or breakfast kind of organization stuff.
Okay, yeah, and we actually do that with our faculty, with junior faculty actually exchange recipes on how to navigate
Just wanted to state a personal opinion and maybe a slightly different angle. So the question is and it's the same for ACM as for SIG, if I pay my membership fee, right, what do I get out of it? Yeah, and networking is really an important point, but I don't have to be a member to do the networking. I can come to a conference, I can use various kind of social media today and so on, just having the membership itself.
So the membership will give you a discount on your conference registration.
That's not it.
And that's actually why many, people become SIG member, because it's cheap, and it's much cheaper than the delta in conference registration. So, but they don't convert that into an ACM membership because they don't need to.
So, but what I actually want to say, maybe this classical membership model is not what we need anymore.
Yeah, it is an ACM-wide, it's actually not just ACM. I think most professional organizations And ACM is trying actually hard to articulate and find ways of creating value. It's not working very well, let's put it this way.
I know. Another thought is also talking about senior and junior people doesn't really help, because that is kind of distributing people into two groups, what you not want, right? You want everybody work together.
Yeah.
Maybe a short thing. I'm a postdoc now. I was a student up until recently, and I never been a member of any SIG or so, because I never saw any value with that. I never found any news feed available for me to understand about, like to know about events or anything else. And maybe that's the right way, is to go with social media or so, Twitter, Facebook, so on, and maintain groups or pages or something to announce things for students. Something like that.
Yeah, so we have a Twitter feed, we have a Facebook page. I think the problem is that keeping those relevant with new information coming on a regular basis, and it's a little bit of a chicken and egg, right? Once you have a momentum going, then I think it can maybe sustain itself. But bootstrapping it is a challenge. And so far, we haven't been particularly successful in crossing that threshold where the process is sort of self-sustainable.
Yeah, I'm talking about something specifically for students, maybe, because you want to increase students' attendance or engagement in general.
So. Right, but so we need people who are going to be contributing, interesting material.
I'm pretty sure it's possible to find people that would like to add that.
Are you volunteering?
I can consider that. We can talk about that.
Okay. Because I mean that we're definitely looking for people who are willing to help us. And get him to sign after 2 beers, right?
So the Facebook group actually is pretty self-sustainable at the moment. So the previous EC, Hamed specifically, did a good job of sort of keeping that active. And I just checked, we are just shy of 1,200 people, and it's a closed group, right? So that's almost the size of the SIG that's following the group. So it's not a small club. And there is like a daily post at, I would say, roughly every day, like some call for papers or something else. So it is actually working pretty well. And yeah, maybe, given that the ACM seems to have trouble to count its members, right? So maybe this membership model is really something that we should think about.
Okay, so I think I have heard a couple of good suggestions. Hopefully we can try to follow up on individual discussions and see what happens. Okay, so I don't know what time it is, but it's probably time to wrap up. So I think, the net is, I think, the SIG is still in reasonably good shape. We do have resources, so we can, put those resources to use. And I think the N2Women sort of initiative that we just started is one such example. But we don't have to limit ourselves to that. I think we need your help as much as possible. I think, in terms of, creating awareness of the fact that the SIG is here and willing to help for, these local or regional initiatives that could benefit from some support on the part of the SIG. So if, you happen to know an organizer or someone who is, trying to get something off the ground, this is, again, something where the SIG can help. I think, if you have suggestions in terms of, the various things that we could be doing to improve how we reach out to students and we make, becoming a SIG member and maybe an ACM member, something that they perceive as more valuable by creating sort of exchanges or by participating in the Future Academy of Computing. I think, the SIG is here and willing to help. We have some resources. But we can't do it just by itself. There are only so many people on the EC, and there are only so many things that we can do. And so progress will have to be something that comes from not just the EC but the rest of the community. And we do have resources that we can apply and help make things happen. But in some sense, we're also counting on people bringing forward some of those suggestions and initiatives. So there are a variety of other things, CCR being one of them, and so Olivier and his effort in evaluating artifact is one way of actually, for junior people to getting involved could actually be a pretty good opportunity. And Tristan Henderson is always looking out for various initiatives in the education area, and the link that's on the slide here is where you can find out more information about that. So unless there is anything else, I think I will be bringing this session to a close. I don't know, Lars, Aditya, Dina, do you want to say something? Please shut up, this is what you want to say. Uh-huh.
Hi, Chao from Yale. I'm a postdoc. I'm just wondering, in 2015, SIGCOMM has a public review for every paper. So I'm wondering why those are not continue coming for these few years. Is there any plan to bring it back?
So I think the technical steering committee is the one that actually would be the best. And Ellen, you're the only one left of the technical steering committee right now. So I don't know. I mean, I think this is as part of the what a program chair decide they want to do. So program chairs have some flexibility in organizing the review process and how it goes about. And for example, there were years where the conference had rebuttals, right? And that we're not doing that anymore, right? And there might be sort of people who think that maybe we should reintroduce rebuttals. So it's part of the process of keeping the conference sort of alive is experimenting with different things. I'm not aware of any plan right now of resurrecting public reviews. That would again be something that either an individual program chair or the two program co-chairs or the technical steering committee would be sort of deciding.
Yeah, I do. Yeah. That's very hard.
I have a kind of traditional question that likely occur again then. Earlier this year, I saw an email summarizing by the way, I'm Xiaoming Fu from University of Göttingen. So I saw an email documenting the statistics about different conferences. Their percentage of the PC members were publishing the paper in the conference. Mm-hmm. And SIGCOMM is among those in the kind of yellow or even red group, right? And more severely, whether the future that says the PC chairs are allowed to continue to submit papers. I would like to see this kind of aspect to be discussed here.
Right, so again, I think these aspects are aspects that are under the purview of the technical steering committee of the conference. So, in some sense, the EC and the executive committee and the technical steering committee try to partition work. That doesn't mean that we're completely ignoring it, right? So if there is a community sort of outcry about a particular issue, obviously the EC is going to be stepping in, and we have certain initiatives that we want to promote or encourage, right? And the EC will do that. But in the end, the technical steering committee has the responsibility of making the decisions that are going to be affecting the program of the conference itself and the review process in particular. I think there have been discussion in the past, right, and it's gone back and forth in terms of whether PC chairs should be prevented from submitting papers versus allowed to submitting paper. There are pros and cons with both options, right? If you prevent PC chairs from submitting papers, you're going to have a harder time finding good people, because often those good people, are, active in the area and want to publish. At the same time, it definitely can create some, sort of conflict of interest, or at least perception of conflict of interest issues. I think we have mechanism in place to handle those, but the mechanisms are what they are, right? again, these are not new, as I think you just mentioned, right? I mean, they've been mentioned a number of times, and I think the SIG has gone back and forth, and I think the outcome is that there's not the perfect solution either way. Right, so I mean, Brad was here, and Ellen is part of the TSC, and okay, that's actually a good point. Yep.
Yeah. So I just wanted to throw in a plug for Peterson and Davey, the textbook.
Oh yes, thank you.
So this is a resource that many of us use in our undergrad classes to teach networking. It turns out that Peterson and Davey is now an open source textbook. We'll be sending out an email to the broader community about what this means. This means that you can contribute, modify, and possibly even for commercial reasons, alter the source of the text. It's on GitHub, and I think they're looking for people to contribute, but also to take advantage of this model.
That's right. So they've made the text of the current edition. So they're still planning, I think, a new edition that will be published still through, I don't know whether probably Springer or whoever the publisher is. Okay, Elsevier. Okay. But the current edition was released as open source, and so they're interested in people contributing to that and using it. I think they're particularly interested in aspects that relate to providing historical perspective, which they feel is something that the book does reasonably well in terms of why were certain design decisions made throughout the history of the internet. And people actually can contribute and enrich the current text, again, as an open source contribution. So they essentially welcoming people interested in doing that. And so thanks for remembering to mention that. Post it on Facebook. All right. Unless there's anything else, I will be bringing this session to a close. Thank you for everyone who stayed till the bitter end.